What is going on, everyone? Happy last day of NBA All-Star break. It's been a fun one. I know we've had a bunch of people that have been kind of grinding NHL for the first time. So thanks for being here. Today's Tuesday already, February 19th. Today's a great day. So happy you guys are here. You could be doing anything right now, but you are here. So for that, I'm quite grateful, guys. Jay Rogers, right before we went live, with the tier 1 sub. What's up, man? Thanks for being with us for 3 months. That reminds me that this is officially last call today before the NHL slate starts for the resub contest. So if you guys didn't know about the resub contest, I'll walk through that quickly. So basically what I'm doing, what the great people at Monkey Knife Fight have done, is giving us a bunch of prizes. So if I do this every month, we always do kind of a different sort of prize or prize pool. We've given away free one-on-one coaching in the past. We've given away some subscriptions to places like Daily Roto Tracker. But this month, Monkey Knife Fight stepped up, and honestly, pretty sweet prize pool. So for first place, you're going to get a $100 credit at Monkey Knife Fight, and then a nice flat payout structure goes all the way down. 10th place, still going to get $10 at Monkey Knife Fight. So the way that you get into the resub contest, I'm sure a lot of you guys have been gifted a sub in the past for the Twitch stream. If you have been gifted a sub, or you are already a Twitch subscriber, if you resubscribe or extend that subscription, you just have to send me a screenshot of that in the Discord. But the wrinkle this month is that you also have to have some sort of deposit, any deposit on Monkey Knife Fight. It's a prop game site. We've been kind of playing these a bunch. We do have a bunch of free channels in the Discord as well. Bovada, BetOnline, MyBookie, and we've added Monkey Knife Fight to that recently. And what I found personally is just a lot of fun to kind of shop around for different books. So I'm focusing on those four for now. And then we've kind of had some activity in the Discord just to kind of discuss different lines and stuff like that. So it's been a lot of fun. You should jump in with us if you haven't tried one of these sites before. This would be a great opportunity to do so. If you do get into this free roll, it's going to be for the NHL main slate, what we're going to talk about on today's stream. But if you do get in this, I don't know, I guess you can't have overlay in a free roll contest, but I will say that paying out 10 spots is looking pretty good right about now. So jump in the resub contest if you haven't already. It'll be a ton of fun to kind of play NHL. I think this is the first NHL contest we've done with the community. Maybe we should start doing these a little bit more. I know we've had a bunch of people. Shout out Doozy in the chat. Part of my, I guess my showdown crew, my NHL showdown crew. We've been kind of grinding that a bunch. Jay Sousa jumped in last night for the first time. Shout out Jay Sousa. Bobby, what's up, man? Thanks for being back with us to talk some NHL. Yeah, guys. So I'm sure a lot of you guys watched Manny's rerun today, which was great. He's deserved a break. That guy's been doing 2 streams a day for quite a while now with the NBA stuff going on. So I'm enjoying everyone's interest in NHL, but we're going to continue kind of rolling with this. So hopefully you guys will stick with us. Packers fan 5094 with the follow. What's up, man? Thanks for being with us. Thanks for joining the community. Definitely going to have a lot of awesome stuff for subscribers, a lot of awesome stuff coming on YouTube. Spent my morning on YouTube SEO, which actually is a lot more fun than it sounds. So we'll get that all locked in this time of the year now that we're not grinding NFL. I have a little bit more time to deal with that kind of stuff. But you guys probably don't care about any of that. TBest459 finally gets to join a live stream. Yeah, man. I kind of like these afternoon streams. I used to do a lot of streams at night after lock, and I've just found that by the time I've gotten through whatever I'm playing for the night, 3-4 locks between NBA, NHL, I'm just so gassed by the end of those. It's fun to jump on and sweat lineups and all that. But I like these afternoon streams. They're more relaxed. I feel like we just get a lot more done. Some people are watching from work. Some people aren't able to do that. If you aren't able to catch any of the live streams, a lot of these will go up on YouTube, but a lot of them will be able to be replayed on my Twitch videos as well for Twitch subscribers. So yeah, so we have a lot to talk about, guys. 9-game slate. There's some huge tournaments tonight. This is probably the first time I've ever seen a tournament with 100K up top for NHL on DraftKings. And I will say that the tournament structure is absolutely terrible. It's like 18% of the field's paid out. Obviously massively top heavy with 100K first prize. I don't know. I'll probably fire at it. So, I mean, there's not many times, at least in the NHL streets, that you can turn like, I think it's like $350 into 100K. So I'll throw at least one team in there for sure. Probably the same team I'll throw in the resub contest. I'll be in the showdown streets as well. There's a really nice showdown contest tonight. Doozy, I'm with you, man. I love the Coyotes, so I like that I get to play these showdown slates. I'm from Arizona, so I get to watch them a little bit more. That they're always on the showdown slates, and it has to do with these West Coast teams, right? So they're always a little bit later. Same thing with Edmonton. I feel like they're always on the slate. San Jose, those type of teams. So yeah, man, the Coyotes get the big showdown slate. It's kind of hilarious. But yeah. So Bobby in the chat said finished tied for 7th in the $5 last night in DK. That's awesome, dude. That had to have been a nice sweat for you. What was that? What was up top on that? 20K up top? Is that what you're saying? Jeez. Sweating Chara and Niskanen was painful. Yeah, dude. Chara was an interesting one. I ended up having him on some teams earlier this week. He had some like nicer, longer term trends that we could talk about for sure. Yeah, Corey. Last night was a crazy night in the NHL. It's a massive understatement, man. It was crazy. That Chicago showdown slate. Those aren't slates that I normally perform as well in, just because like if we're doing the right things, like we're targeting shots, block shots, all the peripheral stats that we've talked about on NHL week. It's really tough when some of these guys that don't normally stack up that floor start to grab a bunch of score points. So that showdown slate was great. Like if you had to brink it, you probably didn't have Kane and Taves. If you had Kane and Taves, you better have gotten your value piece right, or you weren't cashing that showdown. So ended up, I feel like I kind of weathered the storm a little bit. My team ended up being totally fine for cash. Most of the 3-mans just bubbled the GPP. So ended up basically even on that showdown slate, which feels like a win after all those goals. But we're going to talk a lot more about probably Classic today. If you guys have any specific showdown questions, feel free to throw those to me. We do have Columbus and Montreal at 6:30 Central Time, actually. So 7:30, you guys, most people's time, Eastern Time. And then, of course, we have the Coyotes and the Edmonton Oilers with the big showdown slate, with the big contest later on tonight. So that'll be fun. If you have any questions specifically about those, feel free to kind of talk about that throughout in the chat. Try and jump out as many questions as I can. But let's jump into this, guys. 9 games. This is a huge slate, a lot to kind of go through. So let's start on the team ratings page like we do every week. Every day. We've been doing a lot more NHL streams lately, which is a lot of fun for me personally, just because I love NHL. So maybe we'll keep this rolling a little bit until at least MLB starts. But guys, so there's a couple things that definitely stand out. We don't have Ottawa to attack tonight, like we had, I guess, that clear game last night with Chicago and Ottawa. I think there was like 80 shots on goal in that game total. So that honestly wasn't super surprising. Obviously, I didn't expect there to be like 7 goals in the first period like there was. But yeah, those are exactly the kind of games that we're targeting. We're targeting teams that give up a lot of shots for teams that shoot a lot. And that was like the perfect storm of that last night. If we just want to look at teams that defensively have been giving it up lately, Philadelphia Flyers, Pittsburgh Penguins, Anaheim Ducks, these teams have been giving up a ton of shots. You could even throw the Coyotes into that. The Coyotes and the Flyers have actually not been giving up a ton of goals on those shots as well. So a lot of times we can expect that kind of to regress back to the mean. But in particular, Pittsburgh and Anaheim, both sides of the puck in these games, look pretty interesting to me. So I'm always kind of interested in that. Teams that haven't been giving up a ton of shots lately, at least over the past month, Minnesota. So if you're going to play this Minnesota-Anaheim game, much prefer the Minnesota side than the Anaheim side. There's definitely an argument for getting some lower ownership on the Ducks, but I would imagine that their implied total is probably pretty low. And we always like to kind of start on this page, by the way, just so that we can kind of get an idea of the slate as a whole before we kind of cloud our judgment with the Vegas page. I'm just going through this for the first time with you guys as well. So that's an interesting one for just looking at the Corsi expectation. So what kind of bakes into effect short-term and longer-term stuff, offensive and defensive, into one kind of metric. So anytime I see Montreal, a lot of that has to do with them as a team. So second highest Corsi for over the past month. If we're just looking over the past year, top 3. So they shoot a lot. As far as the Columbus side of things, yeah, I mean, so they're below average in shots against. So a lot of this number comes from Montreal, but they are at home, so that's at least interesting. Anaheim, again, has been giving up a ton of shots, so the Minnesota being high in this is not surprising at all. This is kind of an interesting one. So Carolina, they're another one of those teams that shoots a ton, but we've talked about it before on the stream. This Rangers team has been playing so well defensively. They haven't given up a ton of shots, haven't been giving up goals, but against this team like Carolina, where there's going to be a lot of shots from their end, I think this game is somewhat of a trap. I mean, just looking at it like this, so 9-game slate for the top 18 teams are in this game as far as shots against. So, I mean, both these teams are playing pretty good defense. They're not giving up a ton of goals. That looks like a pretty clear under to me. So I don't know if I really agree with Carolina having a super high Corsi there. We'll see what they're like in the Vegas lines, but we have them at the second highest goals for. That's probably not going to be one that I'm on. Maybe a one-off with someone like Sebastian Aho, who is matching a bunch of my trends. But as far as stacking up this game, I think that might be a spot to kind of grab some ownership in other spots. So one of those spots that makes a ton of sense to grab that ownership is Pittsburgh. So Pittsburgh, highest goals for expectation on the sheet. Also the best matchup rating against this Jersey team, who's just really struggled surprisingly this year after having a great year last year. So just outside the top 5 in Corsi against over the past month, but they have allowed the 5th most goals over that time. So a really strong matchup for Pittsburgh. Just offensively, Pittsburgh top 5 in goals, not surprising, and shots, top 4 in shots. So I think it's a really nice spot for Pittsburgh even on the road. I'm sure they're going to grab some ownership. They always do, but that's an interesting one. Panic with the day-to-day tag to contain your excitement. Oh, so yeah, we should talk about that, Doozy. So last night we had TJ Oshie with the day-to-day tag or game time. Yeah, I think it was a game time decision tag actually. And so no one was going to play him in Showdown. By the time we got to that, obviously we're all kind of monitoring the lines as they come through officially during warmups, and Oshie was going to play. So people only had about probably 15 minutes to figure out what they were going to do with Oshie. And to me, that's just like a shove. I'm playing him no matter what. So I was pretty convinced we'd get him under 10%. We did. He was like 8 or 9% owned in the bigger GPP and Showdown. People are just so scared on DraftKings by those type of tags. So yeah, if we have a one for Panic, that's interesting for sure, Doozy. Yeah, so nice smaller tournament that I'm sure you guys will be looking to MME for sure. I'm thinking about just playing 1 in the 300 and just kind of taking my shot at that big prize pool, but we'll see. Yeah, so that's kind of what I'm looking at so far on this page. If we just want to look at teams maybe to avoid on the other side of this, definitely not going anywhere near the Rangers against Carolina. Carolina's another team that's played well. Mentioned, well, defensively, but I mentioned I just don't like that game as a whole. Anaheim, tough spot in Minnesota, team that's played much better historically at home as well. And this Tampa Bay team just exploded last night as well. Like Kucherov, like quietly is like, I guess maybe not so quietly, but back almost in his form of last year where he was just tearing this league apart. So him, Point, Stamkos, very much in play. The other side of the game, Philly, they're just not shooting the puck a ton right now, so it's a little bit lower floor for sure. Tampa Bay is obviously a pretty good defensive team. If we're just looking at goals against, only the St. Louis Blues have allowed fewer goals against this year, over the past month at least, than Tampa Bay. So I actually think that the St. Louis and Toronto game is somewhat interesting. I'm not sure what the ownership will be on that. But if we just look at the Corsi 4 expectation, both of these teams are in the top 5. That's the only game we really have like that. Like I just said that St. Louis has been playing elite defensively as far as their goals against. But I still think that Toronto is a team that could still potentially get to them. Like we mentioned, they're the highest Corsi 4 team over that same period, and obviously the fourth highest goals for. So that's kind of an interesting contrarian spot where everyone just wants to talk about how good St. Louis has been. They really have been. They've been amazing. But a contrarian Toronto stack, Matthews, Tavares, those guys are always in play for the amount of shots that they're kind of throwing on net. They don't correlate super well, obviously, both centermen. But I'm kind of interested in this game. I'm interested in the St. Louis side as well, depending on what the options are for that. Toronto's a team that'll give it up for sure. So I think that's an interesting game to stack. That could be a little bit more higher pace than people realize, with how well St. Louis has been playing. So interested in that. Let's see what else we got here. That's pretty much all that stands out to me on this page for sure. Edmonton, wow, they've really not been giving up a lot of shots, but they have been giving up a ton of goals. So kind of a high efficiency spot for the Coyotes tonight. That'll be a little bit more relevant on Showdown, kind of the opposite on the other side. The Coyotes have been giving up a lot of shots, not a lot of goals. So, yeah, the Coyotes are somewhat interesting for tournaments, I think, especially against this Edmonton team. It's always interesting to kind of stack against Edmonton in tournaments. The Coyotes definitely have some volume shooters. They talked about it on the broadcast last night. Their strategy right now is just to get a lot of pucks on net. And for a team that's maybe not as talented as a lot of other ones in the league, I definitely don't think that that's a horrible strategy. So it's allowing us to get these Coyotes players, these cheaper players, honestly, because their implied totals are never that high. But get some elite peripheral stats from them at a discount. So guys like Derek Stepan, Galchenyuk, Keller, they're always ones that I find myself at least looking at based on what their prices are and kind of the way that this team's trying to play right now. Trap 168, is Tarasenko playing tonight? I thought somewhere that he was questionable. That's a good question, man. I should check that. I did see that he was a little bit banged up, but I think he's going to play. Let's see what the last tweet was about him. All right, nothing there. I'm not seeing anything so far. But yeah, that definitely would throw a little bit of a wrinkle in my St. Louis kind of contrarian stack thought. See. Yeah, not seeing. I think he's good to go, man. Haven't seen anything on it yet. Did he have the questionable tag next to his name? Let's just check. Just got my dummy lineups in here right now, so don't mind those. Let's see. Doesn't look like he has a questionable tag, but let's see what they say here. Yeah, we'll see. Looks like he's all right, man. We'll have to keep an eye on that, though, because I do think that he had at least one moment of that last game where he kind of came out, something like that. So, yeah, good call, man. We'll have to keep an eye on that. But, yeah, outside of that, guys, that's all I'm really seeing on the team ratings page. You'll see what Vegas thinks so far. Okay, Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's almost like the Yankees in baseball in a lot of ways. Like, they always seem to, like, have really high totals. Definitely don't think that Pittsburgh's a bad play by any means. But on the road, 3.7, that's a huge number for a road team. So we'll have to kind of take notice of that. Tampa Bay on the road as well with a pretty high number. Historically, just the research that I've done on Fantasy Labs using their trends tool, just the consistency just tends to really spike for their 3.5 implied goals and above. So interested in kind of getting pieces of all these. We'll see what it ends up being. The highest favorite, actually, Carolina against the Rangers. That's an interesting one. I think that game is definitely one you're going to have to get right tonight. I think I'm more interested in the Minnesota side of this game if I'm just kind of looking purely at the goaltender side of things. But those are both ones where I don't know if there's going to be a ton of shots going their way. So, yeah, we'll have to keep an eye on that. But let's look outside the top tier just because I think that on a tournament night like tonight is something that we're going to have to consider. So, yeah, St. Louis and Toronto just outside that top tier, but still pretty solid for both these teams. I think that's interesting. So Pittsburgh is another. So let's talk about Pittsburgh quickly and go back here. So Pittsburgh has given up the second most Corsi against over the past month, also the third most goals. So I think where a lot of people are going to go in this Pittsburgh game is obviously to the Penguins in that top power play unit. A more unique way to kind of pivot away might be to take a closer look at New Jersey. Definitely don't think that they're an elite spot by any means, but if we're just trying to grab a lower owned stack, there's definitely some cheaper guys on New Jersey that could be interesting. Coyotes way down here on their applied total, and Anaheim, like I said, against the Wild at home. That's a really tough spot. Another potential like kind of really under-owned spot would be the Dallas Stars. Guys like Sagan. Ben's price is really low, but yeah, obviously against Nashville, not going to be a core play for me by any means. I think at the top, it's hard to kind of get away from Pittsburgh, but if we're just looking for some teams that might go under-owned, that Toronto game for sure could be interesting to me. I was hoping that this Columbus game would have a higher total. I do really like Atkinson quite a bit, who we'll talk about when we get into the positions, but that's a pretty low total even for on the road. All right, so again, guys, if I'm flying through any of this too quick, just let me know. But let's move over to the positions now. Start with the centers. All right, so let's make this a little bit bigger here. All right. So if you missed any of the streams before, this is kind of how I'm doing things, is kind of trying to filter through some of the stuff here without giving away anything premium, of course. So centerman at the high end, Austin Matthews, talked about him, 98th percentile in shots, 99th in shots plus blocks. It's really hard to argue with this guy. You might get him at drastically lower ownership, in my opinion, against the St. Louis team, who's obviously played so well lately. So that anytime that I start to hear like multiple people talking about, oh, this Blues team's really turned it around, I really think that they're a favorite to go far in playoffs, like out of nowhere. I'm interested in kind of getting the other side of that, especially if we get a guy like Austin Matthews, John Tavares at lower ownership. So I definitely think that they're both interesting. Mentioned Tyler Seguin, of course. You'll get him much lower owned against Nashville in a similar position. Both those guys probably not core plays tonight by any means. Evgeny Malkin, 96th percentile in shots. We don't normally see him near that high, to be completely honest with you guys. Crosby's usually the one that we usually get the high volume shooting for. Wow, so he's got 12 shots in his last 2 games. Crazy. Obviously the suspension in there as well. So yeah, Malkin's an interesting one for sure. A good majority of his usage is always coming on the power play, which I do love. So if we're just looking at guys, there are 3 guys in the 99th percentile in power play shots over the past month. I mentioned Matthews before, Evgeny Malkin, and Nazem Kadri. Wow. So he's another guy. So he's always a little bit cheaper because he's the third line center for Toronto, but he just has so much upside. A 12-shot game in there, yeah, but more or less just like getting access to that power play unit, that PP1 for Toronto at a discount. That's why Kadri always seems to kind of stand out from that perspective. If we're just looking at Corsi, obviously Corsi is super important at the center end position. I mentioned Sebastian Aho earlier. I think he'll be relatively highly owned with that total. It's just a really tough spot against the Rangers. Definitely think that I prefer him more as like a one-off play than fully stacking up the Carolina side. I still think that Aho is a guy that can get his price all the way down to 6,900. Seems somewhat interesting. It is a tough matchup, obviously. Tavares is always someone that's popping in Corsi. He just makes a ton happen out there. I think I probably prefer Matthews in a vacuum just because the floor is a little bit kind of lower with Tavares in my opinion, but still a guy that if Toronto does play well is going to be super involved. So Sidney Crosby, probably the clear cash play tonight. 98th percentile Corsi, 95th in shots over the past month. With that massive total, Crosby's going to be involved, guys. So the shots should be there. But yeah, I mean, you don't need me to tell you that he's a really strong play against the Devils, even on the road. You're going to have to pay for him, though, 7,700. Similar price point to Connor McDavid. McDavid's one that I struggle with a little bit sometimes just because the team's always got a lower total, of course. But also, like, in comparison to some of these other guys that we talk about all the time, Bergeron, Matthews, Crosby, McDavid's just not a super high volume shooter. So what we've seen the last 3 games hasn't really been something we've seen long term. So I try and not get really too kind of caught up in some of these really small samples at times. I mean, I think McDavid's fine. He's always fine. He's the best player in the world. I just think in cash games, it's it's a tougher position. Obviously, Arizona's played pretty well defensively this year. Say what you want about the Coyotes, but yeah, that's going to be an interesting showdown slate for sure. Just looking at shots plus blocks, we have a bunch of really nice options, obviously. But one guy we didn't mention in that same game, Derek Stepan. So if you watch, I've watched more Coyotes games, I think, in the last couple months just because they've been on more showdown slates. But this team shoots a ton. And Stepan just like is always throwing pucks on the net. So he's like, there was a play last night where he came out of the corner and just threw a backhander on net. And probably didn't have any chance to score. But, I mean, still a shot on DraftKings. And if he's willing to kind of throw pucks on net from everywhere, like it seems like he is, he's a guy that I'm interested in for sure. In showdown, a guy that's going to be active on the power play, obviously a really skilled player. Jack Eichel, didn't talk at all about Buffalo, I guess. That's kind of like a middling spot on the slate from a Corsi perspective, but Jack Eichel is always in play for one-offs for me. Always think that he's kind of an elite shooter as well that we want to try and prioritize. 98th percentile power play shots as well, so at least we know those high equity situations. He's going to be extremely involved. So yeah, I think that's interesting. Steven Stamkos, I think a lot of people will be on him after that night that Toronto or that Tampa Bay had last night, but it is a really strong matchup against Philly, 96th percentile in shots allowed over the past month. So I think that Tampa Bay is still very much in play again. Obviously, they have that 3.5 implied total even on the road, where I think a lot of people will go Pittsburgh. Makes a ton of sense to go back to Tampa Bay. A lot of people want to talk about how well Philly's played lately, but I do think that at some point they're going to kind of regress. Maybe not back to as bad as they were earlier in the year, but I really don't think that they're maybe as good either. So as a lot of people think. So reminds me of the Evander Kane lob pass goal. Yeah, that was insane, man. Yeah, that backhander. I know exactly what you're talking about. Guess we got a little bit lucky on that slate because I think we all had Kane, but yeah, man, a similar type of mindset though, right? So Kane's throwing pucks on the net all the time. Same thing with Stepan. So yeah, good point on that one, Doozy. So let's see if there's any value at the center position now. We're gonna need some value if we want to get in some of these stacks. So not a ton of high volume shooters. So it looks like our top guy in shots over the past month, 74th percentile. That's really low. Corsi, we do have a 92nd percentile guy there. I'm going to probably butcher this guy's name. Kokanemi. That's probably not right. Anyways, so he's, I believe, their third line center. Not a high volume shooter by any means, but at that price, 3,700. He's definitely in the punt conversation. Nick Cousins, I keep bringing up Coyotes, but again, I still think that a lot of these guys are kind of underpriced relative to their roles. He's obviously not going to be a high volume shooter for us, but you do correlate with a guy like Clayton Keller, and we'll see what line he ends up on tonight, but does get some power play time as well. Casey Middlestad, really similar play. The Stone Min, I think he's an interesting flyer. Definitely not a shooter, but playmaker out of the University of Minnesota that's got a lot of talent. Yeah, don't love the value for center tonight. Let's move on to wingers. All right, so the winger position, not looking at as much on like shot plus blocks and blocks. These guys are more shooters by trade anyway, so it's really hard to get away from a guy like Cam Atkinson as one-off plays. If you don't want to stack up Columbus, totally get that. But this guy might be the highest volume shooter that we have available on tonight's slate. Like we talked about it last night with Ovechkin. He was like 70% owned in Showdown. It's a really tough format to not have the high volume shooter. So Cam Atkinson is a guy that I almost surely will have on Showdown tonight. Do think that you can't really pass on this type of shooting volume. 99th percentile in shots over the past month, 99th in shots plus blocks, but again, 97th in power play shots is super appealing to me because there's a lot of his shooting is coming on the power play. So Cal Palmieri, I do really like Palmieri as a player, and in this game against Pittsburgh, where I think a lot of people are going to go the Pittsburgh route, he makes an interesting kind of contrarian play, but he still has a nice floor, right? So 3 or 4 shots, almost a given for Palmieri. Obviously, he's a guy that can get super hot with goals, as we saw to start the season. Has 3 over his last 4, so quietly kind of heating up. 5,700 is a really nice price point for Palmieri, especially against the Penguins team that's really struggled at times this year. So again, Penguins, 96th percentile in shot attempts allowed over the past month. So 5,700, that seems really cheap for Palmieri. So I'm interested in him for sure in the mid-range. Draisaitl, I always love him with Connor McDavid, and not for the obvious reason. Like, obviously, you love any player with Connor McDavid, but when Draisaitl's a centerman, he's not like a natural high volume shooter. He's more of like a guy that would prefer to be the playmaker on the line. But I mean, playing with McDavid just puts you in so many positions to score and to get open. He's going to find you. Draisaitl has so much upside, and he's shooting a lot more on the wing than he does at center. So I think Draisaitl is super interesting tonight at 6,900. Yeah, you're going to have to pay for him, but he's a guy that I'm probably going to be prioritizing again in Showdown, partly because of McDavid, partly because of his power play shots as well, and a good, pretty solid matchup. Their total, obviously, is somewhat decent, but they are at home, right? So yeah, Cam Atkinson's a guy for sure. Tarasenko, yeah, so I guess watch a potential injury, but I haven't heard much about that yet. Tarasenko's been on a tear, 97 percentile in shots over the past month, but just a guy that struggled a lot to start the year, but has really turned it around. So I like Tarasenko a lot tonight. I mentioned the Blues as maybe a team that could go under the radar. If we're just looking purely for upside, it's really tough to argue with what Tarasenko's done. He's scored in 3 straight, but man, he's got 7 goals in his last 5, 8 in his last 6. Like that, he's just on some crazy run right now. He's going to be super involved on the power play, no matter who's scoring, to be honest. So it's really easy to correlate that first power play unit as well. Tarasenko, Shen, Pietrangelo, all these guys, Ryan O'Reilly, they're all playing together on even strength and on the first power play unit. So that's another great data point in favor of the St. Louis Blues. Love Tarasenko at 7,300. He might be my favorite winger outside of Cam Atkinson tonight. Maybe that's a hot take. Maybe it's not. I have no idea. I don't really listen to anyone else's stuff. But yeah, Richard Panik at 3,900. Definitely a salary saver. So let's move over to the value side of wingers. We're going to need value to get in some of these guys. We haven't really found any of it yet. So let's see. We got some more shooters here. So Joel Armia, yeah, like he's a guy that I don't think his ceiling is super high, but this is a pretty safe shot floor for a guy that you can get at 4,300. Montreal, reasonable spot for sure against Columbus. Just kind of middle of the pack there, but 92nd percentile Corsi's nice for Armia. So depending on what line he ends up on tonight, he is slotted into the first power play unit currently. So that's an interesting one. Evan Rodriguez, he's someone that I had last week as kind of a salary saving punt in that game that we really like Buffalo. He's shooting a lot, guys. So I think that he's a guy that is interesting for sure as well. Someone else that's like someone that's very active on the power play. Kind of an elite playmaking type guy. Played with his brother in pro, and both of these guys, they play the exact same way. Rodriguez got a little more of a motor to him, but yeah, I think he's interesting as a kind of a salary saver. T-Best 459 Prime subscription. What's up, man? Thanks for being with us. Hopefully you'll be with us after the NBA All-Star break, and we can kind of continue on the NHL grinds. But yeah, I always like to remind people too, if you do have an Amazon Prime account, like you automatically get a Twitch Prime subscription. So make sure that you're taking advantage of that for sure. There's a bunch of free stuff you can take advantage of, guys. The Twitch Prime, obviously, that'll give you access to all the premium channels in the Discord. We also have a bunch of free Discord channels as well, where we kind of focus on player props like I was talking about before. So yeah, make sure you're taking advantage of that stuff for sure. All right, so I'm looking. Those are probably the guys that I'll be on tonight on the value sides of things. So Jakob Silfverberg, he looked really good. So Anaheim, obviously they just dismantled Washington the other night. Silfverberg is a guy that historically has been a very high volume shooter for us. He's kind of not been a forgotten man, but he hasn't had like a massive role this year, but he's really turned it on lately. And he's a guy that he's kind of the outlier. We talk about Hornquist a lot as a winger that does block shots as well. Silfverberg's kind of in that mold as well. Definitely a threat to score. Obviously 2 goals, scored a really nice goal in that game as well. But nice floor from Silfverberg. Not only guy, so 99th percentile in shots plus blocks. You very rarely see that for a guy at 4,200. So he's one of the top value options tonight. In any matchup, obviously the Wild, it's a really tough matchup. Silfverberg is a guy that I think still could battle through that and at least hit value for you at that price. So, all right, so let's look at some defensemen here. Do want to shout out Sal though. So Sal Vitry, I'm probably saying your name wrong, man. You should make sure you correct me on that if I am. But He's been doing some awesome stuff on YouTube, on Twitch with NBA, so definitely check out his stream. Make sure you give him a YouTube sub as well. So one of the few people, and the only reason I shout him out, honestly, there's a few people, like, I've gotten really into the YouTube thing and like what happens with SEO, what happens with your thumbnails, all of that. And I'm kind of working towards getting mine to where I want it to be now that football's over. But there's a lot of people that kind of half-ass YouTube, I guess. Sal's not one of them. He's got a lot of really sharp stuff going on behind the scenes that I know just doesn't happen instantly. So yeah, he's doing a lot of cool stuff with NBA. Make sure you check out his YouTube and his Twitch for sure. All right, so let's move over to D-men. These are guys that normally are kind of underpriced relative to their peripherals, so I'm always kind of curious how the slate's going to shape up for those guys. So shots plus blocks, that's something that I'm always prioritizing at any position, but at defenseman, it's almost even more important. So these Oilers guys, Clefbaum, Nurse. Clefbaum, he's obviously a lot more appealing when we get him on the first power play unit with McDavid. Hasn't been skating there as much just because of how well Nurse has played, but look at the shot volume from Clefbaum. He's someone that we're always kind of talking about, is going to add some block shot equity as well. So yeah, if you're fading kind of the McDavid side of things and you just want like a unique one-off play, Clefbaum's a guy that could get there for you at 5,100, probably a little bit overpriced. But Nurse is the guy that you want if you're pairing with McDavid, if you're pairing with Draisaitl, just correlating on the power play unit. But Nurse is a guy that has been shooting a lot. His price has gone up quite a bit, but I still think that he is a guy that I'll be looking to get into some tournament teams today, especially if I end up rolling out any McDavid. That showdown slate's going to be interesting with him for sure. Let's see. PK Subban, Crystal Tang. So the Crystal Tang is going to be extremely chalky today for sure, for probably good reason in this matchup against the Devils. Like, well, Tang's a guy, doesn't have as much safety. There's definitely some more volatility with his shooting, as you can see, but the ceiling is massive. So if you're looking for a ceiling guy to pair with some of these other Penguins, he's a guy that can get you there, that can get you to the top of a tournament. 98th percentile in Corsi, 72nd percentile matchup against New Jersey. Like, it's a really solid spot for the Tang. It's hard to poke any holes at him, especially at 6,500. He's a guy that I'll be like actively trying to get into lineups for sure. Morgan Riley at 6,200. He's at a spot, like a price point that makes me a little bit uncomfortable. He's only the 91st percentile in shots. Shots plus blocks, 94th. Like, that's solid. He's probably stack only for me. Like, if I'm playing Matthews, if I'm playing Tavares, I'll definitely try and play Riley. If I'm playing tiers, he's a guy that I'll try and grab with them for sure. But yeah, he's slightly overpriced relative to kind of these other guys' peripheral stats for sure. Pietrangelo, he's not super safe on the shot side of things, but he adds so much block shot equity that you have to at least consider him. And he is on the first power play, obviously, so he's kind of a threat just to get kind of a greasy assist or something like that. Obviously, 2 assists in the last game. But this block shot volume is really nice from him. Not the best price point, 5,800 for him, but I do think that he's at least interesting in tournaments. So power play shooters, always prioritizing that no matter what the position. Shane Gostisbehere. So yeah, I'm not actively trying to attack Tampa Bay, but if you're trying to get some more, like, again, we're talking some stacks, we're talking contrarian type upside. Ghost is one of those guys that could get you there at low ownership as well against Tampa Bay, and you at least know that his shots are coming in a spot where he's gonna kind of get a lot of equity on the power play for sure. Yeah, Sal, no problem, man. All right, so that's pretty much where I'm at with defense. Let's see if there's any like glaring defense value. So far, I like the winger value the best tonight. Ivan Provorov, he's like kind of the inverse almost of Shane Gostisbehere. Probably not as much upside on the second power play unit, but his peripherals are probably a little bit safer. And you do get him at a discounted price, and does have some volume there at times that can kind of spike out of nowhere. But 4,500 is still a pretty good price for him. Vince Dunn, again, if you're trying to stack the Blues, makes some sense. Kevin Shattenkirk, like, I hate this game, so I think he's a guy that is going to go over owned tonight. But it's hard to argue with what he's done since he's been moved to that first power play unit. His shot volume's really been there, so they've been looking for him. It's kind of the cheapest way to get access to Zibanejad, cheapest way to get access to Zuccarello in that line. So yeah, if you're really trying to stack up a slow-paced game, he's probably your guy. Alex Goligoski, not a ton of upside there, guys. Only 77th percentile in shots, but he does have some block shot value for sure at 4,300. Doesn't seem to be like a really drastically underpriced guy so far at defense, but I mean he'll still give you a really nice floor. Like his shot, yeah, he's going to get you probably 1 or 2 shots, but he's also going to probably add at least 3 blocks. If he gets you an assist, you're there, obviously. So Jakob Churchrin, I like this kid as a player. Obviously his floor is super low, but he's someone that's going to be active for sure. See a lot of these Coyotes guys just underpriced relative to what they've been doing just because they haven't scored a ton of goals. So that's normally what we see with their prices kind of moving. Actually, let's look at one other guy that I did kind of want to talk about at defense because he matched one of my trends today. Let's see if I can find him. Let's move over. Okay, cool. Just want to make sure he was still in. Yeah, so Cam Fowler. He's matched one of my trends today. Historic. I did a whole stream on trends, but he's matched one of my short-term trends for value and for consistency at this price. So he's not going to jump off the page. Only 72nd percentile in shots over the past month. Nothing crazy as far as his Corsi numbers or anything like that as well in a really tough matchup. But I do think that his price is at a spot where he's someone that over the long term has really given us a lot. So I think that he's at least interesting as kind of a one-off play in tournaments at a discount in a really tough matchup that you'll get lower owned for sure. So let's talk about some of the kind of chalkier stacks that I think we'll see tonight. So let's move over to the lines page here. It's a free page at Fantasy Labs. Obviously, I'm always double checking these at Left Wing Lock and at Daily Faceoff. Left Wing Lock has a lot of really awesome stuff for power play. This gets better for visuals, so I can click on guys. So his first power play unit for Pittsburgh is going to be extremely popular. Hornquist at 4,700 is always that's a really low price for him. But yeah, you're not going to get the correlation on even strength, which is not the best situation. But yeah, you'll see these guys be super popular tonight. There's a couple of guys on the second unit that I think are interesting guys. Bukestad at 3,900. He's a shooter for sure. You're just not getting access to some of these elite guys. But if you're fading Pittsburgh, trying to grab a cheaper piece in a high total game can work out at times in tournaments for sure. So Bukestad at 3,900, definitely a value play that we haven't touched on yet that I think is totally fine. So let's see what else let's look at the team or the Vegas page quickly, see if there's any other guys that I think will be highly owned. Obviously Tampa Bay. We'll see if we get Victor Hedman, who left this game last night. So that's kind of we'll see what happens on their power play unit. Carolina, I do think Carolina is interesting from a correlation standpoint. I don't necessarily love the game, but Carolina, if we just move to their even strength lines, obviously we have Niederreiter, Aho, Williams. Like Niederreiter and Williams still probably way underpriced relative to their peripherals, and then we still get them on the first power play unit as well. So if you think that the Rangers have kind of played above what their expectation is lately, and you kind of want to attack that side of things, I could see attacking a Carolina team tonight. Obviously the total's nice. Justin Falk's another piece you can add on to him in tournaments. Don't love him on his own, but I still think that if this power play unit goes off, he'll be involved for sure. Yeah, so I think that those are the ones that I'm kind of looking at, kind of similarly to what I was just talking about. St. Louis, like again, I mentioned that game could be kind of an interesting contrarian type spot. So Shen, O'Reilly, Tarasenko on the first line. They're expensive, but on the power play, you can still add them. Obviously, you still correlate on the power play as well. Add in a guy like Pietrangelo, who I said at 5,800, probably a little bit overpriced, but this team's played really well. So it's hard to argue with that. One other thing that I do always want to kind of mention is I'm always trying to correlate my main stacks with my goaltender whenever possible. And the biggest factor in goaltender scoring is if your team gets the win or not. So trying to attack some of these larger favorites, Carolina, Minnesota, Pittsburgh, always makes a ton of sense, depending on what the price tags are. I still think that if you move down to someone like St. Louis, obviously we don't have a ton of goalies that this time of day have already been kind of confirmed, but that's kind of what I'm looking at so far for that side of things. So if anyone has any further questions, happy to dive in a little bit. I'm just going to kind of go through tiers quickly here. Let's see what we got. not registered for tiers at the moment. By the way, tiers is a much tougher spot to attack, in my opinion, on these larger slates. So 9 games, and it's not even just because there's more options. Like, the thing is, tiers, what the big edge in tiers in NHL is trying to be able to correlate. A lot of times they put these guys in similar tiers so that you can't stack as well as you would want to. So let's see if they did anything like that. So let's look at some of the really popular teams today. So let's look at Pittsburgh first. We got Crosby tier 1, Crystal Tank tier 2. We can stack Pittsburgh if we're playing tiers. That's really nice. Don't hate that. Let's see what Tampa Bay is like. See, this is what I'm talking about. So tier 2, Point and Stamkos together. Having to choose between them is really tough. Like, even last night we had to choose between Kane was in tier 1. We had to choose between Taves and DeBrincat. So if you chose wrong in that tier, all the DeBrincat teams obviously pass you if you had Taves. So Hedman, obviously we don't know if he's playing or not. So yeah, Tampa Bay is not an easy one to correlate at all. Carolina, Aho, only Aho and Teravainen. So, like, for a team with that high of a total, only having 2 guys I can stack with, not super interested in that. Toronto. See, Matthews and Tavares in the same tier. So this is why tiers is so hard in these 9-game slates, because they're doing this by design. So yeah, you can totally stack up Toronto with Matthews or Tavares and then add in Marner and Riley, but your upside is so much smaller when there's a good chance that if you play this stack, you're going to miss an assist. At least if they go completely nuts, you're going to miss an assist from Matthews, from Tavares, and you really, to try and get to the top, really need to get all of those score points. Let's see what else we got. Let's look at Edmonton. Edmonton's always pretty spread out just because McDavid, Draisaitl. Yeah, so you can get 3 from Edmonton, which is probably fine. Not a ton of... See, it's just it's really tough, guys. So these tiers are, I mean, Tarasenko in tier 1. Like, he could easily be a guy that does well in tournaments for you, but he's not going to give you the safety that Crosby or Atkinson give you. So I think it's a really, really tough tier slate for sure, but wanted to at least kind of touch on each of these for sure. Muskie 430. Thanks, Joe. Awesome content. Appreciate you, man. Appreciate you being here. Hopefully NHL can grow a little bit. It's really cool to see some of these big prizes today, so I'm really excited about it. Tier 2, like Crystal Tank's probably the cash play, obviously, but again, like, Aho's got a lot of probably safety there with his shots, but Stamkos, Point could easily be the top guy. Any of these guys in tier 1 or tier 2 could be the top scorer, and these aren't the kind of slates where I'm really trying to fire at these type of things, so I won't spend too much time. Yeah, Doozy, you have to fire some classic today, man. Look at the prize pools. You have to do it. If you take your tiers volume and play it in classic tonight with me. Obviously, we're still playing Showdown. All right. So, guys, that's pretty much going to do it for me today. Like I mentioned, if you haven't already, be sure and get into the resub contest. There's going to be a lot of free money / overlay in that for sure. So, I mean, if you want like a 1 in 15, 1 in 20 chance of a free $100 at Monkey Knife Fight to kind of fire some props with us, great way to do that is just to get in that resub contest. So I'll say this too. So there's some people that can't play on Monkey Knife Fight just because it's not in every state yet. Technically, it's a fantasy sports game, just like DraftKings, just like FanDuel. So there's a bunch of hoops that kind of have to go through to get approved in every state. So if you have someone else that you can refer and they also use my promo code, I'll give you access to the resub contest, obviously. Maybe we could change your prize up a little bit. We'll see. But we'll talk about that for sure. If you haven't already, check out the Discord. That's where a lot of the conversation happens after the stream, obviously. And if you haven't, definitely check me out on YouTube, where it's going to be a lot more going on over in the YouTube streets very soon. So do me a favor, give me the follow over there as well. Check out Sal's stream for NBA, definitely, once you guys get back for those. So I'm sure a lot of you guys watching probably check out Manny's streams every day. Sal's usually on a little bit before that, so check out his streams for sure. All right, guys. Last night of All-Star break NHL shows. It was a lot of fun. Thanks for being through this. Hopefully we've convinced you to stay in the NHL streets a little bit longer. If you do, you know your guy. So good talk. See you guys out there.